I mean, my Republican career polls in Richmond, Virginia for Republicans handing out literature every cycle. So, I was involved since the early days, and I had a bunch of right-leaning policy jobs over the years. Whether I was working for Olympia Snow or working at Altria, and doing tobacco policy, and later focusing on small business issues in the Affordable Care Act. I was all in. So, people always, call Megan and I rhinos, but we really spent a lot of time in Republican politics.
Yeah, no, you certainly have. I think it's hard to discredit your conservative and your Republican bona fides, for sure. So, and Megan, for those folks who are just tuning in, you started Republican Women for Progress. Yeah. And before that, you, oh, I'm getting some feedback on my end. Okay. So, sorry about that. So we're live, folks. It's a live rally. Okay, so Megan, so you've worked in finance and the banking world. You were based in Berlin and Frankfurt for a little bit, and Germany's Ministry of Economics. You're a presidential management fellow, also a lawyer. So will you tell us, why did you initially become a Republican, and then maybe what does it mean to you to be a Republican in this day and age, especially when you haven't supported the party's nominee for the past 2 cycles?
Yeah, well, I guess, if you grow up in South Mississippi to a Southern Baptist family, it's kind of difficult to not be a Republican. But I also had the good sense of being in a small business family. So I think very early on, I connected with a lot of these, more fiscally conservative, pro-business, free market sort of ideals that initially led me to start our high school's teenage Republican clubs, TARs, and then jumped on my first presidential campaign in 2004 in New Hampshire as a 17-year-old from Mississippi going door to door, which feels very strange. Wow. Why are those people talking to me? But why did I stay in? I guess it's, I having worked on so many campaigns, and I did several internships in Washington during college, you just really got this sense of, at least at the time, this was the party that was very pro-growth. They were still the big tent party that wanted to be welcoming to all types, all people from everywhere with any sort of background. And so that's really what attracted me, especially being in DC, kind of being in the heart of it, and really having kind of the most passionate of passionate folks. And obviously that has changed. And I think that was the driving factor for us, Jenny and I, when we kind of sat down in 2016. It's this isn't the party that really raised us. This isn't the party that we know. What do we do about this? How do we fix it? So that was kind of the spark that started the fire.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about that origin story. So Jennifer, how did the two of you meet and join forces?
I know it was pretty epic. Actually, Megan and I didn't even know each other. We had a mutual friend who thought to introduce us, and Republican Women for Hillary started as most good things do over wine at the St. Regis Hotel in DC. So it was about 7 or 8 of us, and we just got together and ordered our wine, and we were all folks in the policy space. And, we were just shocked that, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan had, so early backed Trump as the nominee. And, I was originally so disgusted that in 2020, the nominee was saying, disgusting things about Megyn Kelly. And I was just like, well, this isn't going to go anywhere. Or it wasn't 2020, it was 2016 back then, which feels like 20 years ago. But CNN actually came to our first meeting and covered our story since, we were kind of the first voices to speak out. It was before even, Trump was officially the nominee. And so, after that, we were invited to speak at the Democratic National Convention. And we, it really we really hit it off after that. And thank goodness Megan and our other co-conspirators, Ariel and Kodiak, because it was a ton of work, and we were doing press every day, and we kept thinking we would have more friends come out of the woodwork, and more Republicans come out. Like, we were speaking out, and it was just silence for a long time.
Yeah, it was. That's part of what discouraged me the most about the past 4 years is the Republican silence and that courage deficit. And I don't know how we overcome that, but you all have a little bit of an idea of how to overcome where the direction of the party is going. Before we get there, though, Megan, will you talk to us about what it was like to be a Republican for Hillary in 2016 versus what it's like now to be a Republican for Biden?
Oh man, I'm not sure there's a huge difference. I can tell you, I guess in 2016, as Jenny said, we were at least very early on, there was a big shock factor of like, why are these ladies who have been in the party their whole lives coming out for this woman who the party has told us to hate our whole lives? And so we got a lot of hate mail, or as I like to call them, we had a lot of fans on the internet. And, it was tough. I think that it's always tough being kind of the first mover, but it was especially tough when it's these people that you've trusted and worked with and hung out with socially that are the ones telling you how horrible and stupid and ugly and every word in the book that you are. I guess the difference with it this year is there are more people kind of in this space. We're certainly not alone. We've got groups like the Biden Republicans and folks like you that are being these huge voices of truth that are right there with us. So it feels less lonely. It still feels very empowering.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's my internet or Megan's internet, but so
Megan's
there
insane.
are more voices this
now,
time.
So. Oh, there she is.
All right, great. So Jennifer, why, you've opposed Donald Trump in 2016, you've opposed him in 2020. A lot of Republicans are happy to support him. And so will you tell everybody that's listening, why do you still consider yourself to be a Republican? Why is that an important moniker to hold on to?
No, that's a great question. We always like to say that we're the ones who are still Republicans. It's the current Republican Party who's left us. They're the ones who have changed their values and gone 20 steps backwards in terms of reforming and modernizing as a party. We talk a lot about we have a lot of friends who are Democrats, of course, and people always ask us why don't you just become Democrats? But we feel like it's so important to make sure that people know that there are Republicans who are speaking out against Trump and the Republican Party in their current form and not letting the fringe of the party take over. And so that's really why we think it's critical that we have Republican in our name. Of course, there are a lot of people in the space who have become Democrats, and that's totally understandable. We just think it's so important to have Republicans specifically out there speaking against the current Republican establishment, and creating that permission structure so that other Republicans can, speak out and the party can actually have a future in a different form.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's our approach here with Biden Republicans. We maintain the values that we've always believed in, even as the party has drifted away. So I'm going to ask you a question that I've been asked a lot, and I'm just going to totally cheat and ask you and help pick your brain. So it makes it easier on me to answer this. But who gets to decide what the Republican Party stands for? Is it the RNC chairman? Is it the presidential nominee? Or is it congressional leaders? Or is it do voters get to decide every time they cast a ballot what the name Republican means. I'm sure you thought a lot about this.
Yes. Well, with Republican Women for Progress, our belief was always that if, more women had been a part of the process and been part in leadership positions in the party, then we wouldn't be in this mess where we are. So our belief is that the future of the party should be deciding how the party will move forward in its next iteration. If we're so lucky to have one. So, obviously the party right now has gone all in on older white men, but to survive, the party needs to, be more inclusive of women and minorities and the younger generation. And we really feel like those are the people who should be, leading the reform efforts when hopefully Trump is not elected again and we have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more that we need women, minorities, Gen Z, millennials leading the change. My big concern or question has been how effective can they be, and also how can we set them up so they are effective in those reform efforts. And so you started an organization, Republican Women for Progress, and I'm curious, was that a natural progression from Republican Women for Hillary? Did you know you were going to start something, or was it a really intentional decision to frame an organization with this mission in this way?
So and Megan, hop in.
Oh yeah,
my Wi-Fi works. I'm back.
But yeah, after Hillary was defeated, we had spent all year with this amazing network of women who, really felt like the party had left them and they had a different vision for where the party should go that wasn't Donald Trump. And so we kept having all these women, and men and Democrats and everybody say, this group that you started and this with this belief is so critical. Don't go anywhere. We really need an organization like this, and so that's why it was such an easy thing to start. To move the group into Republican Women for Progress. And because we didn't want to lose that momentum and lose this network of people who felt so energized to, keep moving towards party reform despite the loss in 2016.
Yeah, great. Megan, I want to bring you back in. This might have been when you were out, but I asked a question, who gets to define what the Republican Party is? So I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on it. And also, can you tell us a little bit about the mission of Republican Women for Progress?
Yeah, so sorry, I'm in the islands and the Wi-Fi tends to change when the wind blows, so apologies. But I think the voters and the members of the party should be the ones that are choosing the direction of the party. And I think at some point they were voting for the people that represented them the best, and the people were truly representing their constituents in Washington. But in the past, even before Trump, it's turned into a situation where you kind of have one party head who is totally driving the direction of the party, and it's either get behind him and fall in line or don't and kind of be kicked out. So your question was who should be, and I think it's the people, the voters, the constituents that are being represented. Who is it now? It's obviously Donald Trump and his cronies. So how do we fix that? I think that's kind of our $1 million question and part of our mission of Republican Women for Progress. I mean, we started the organization, as Jenny just said, because we had this huge outpouring of just support and really people asking us to kind of continue this message going, that it's okay to speak out against your party and to kind of speak power to your truth. And so our mission is to do just that. It's to be able to empower and encourage women to be more involved in politics and in policy, whether that means running for office to make that difference, whether that means running a campaign to make that difference, whether it's just starting a Twitter account to like tweet out to your friends that it's okay to be a Republican and not be a Trump Republican. y'all might have talked about this when I was Wi-Fi off in the wind, but we've written this set of policy principles that we think the Republican Party should get back to. And I think that, our mission in the long term is to get the Republican Party back to a place where it was, or even to a new place that's better, but based back on that sense of being a big tent party and being welcoming to all, and still having that sense of fiscal conservatism and free market economics, but being more socially open-minded to people that may not look like us or love like us or think like us. Because that's the only way the party's going to survive. And if the party doesn't survive, then we lose out on the two-party system. And that's what makes our democracy function. So you can't, like, the dominoes are kind of all lined up for a huge national failure if kind of one thing falls out of place. So I don't want to say we're here to save the world, but we're here to save the world.
Well, sounds good. And y'all are good folks to do it. So I do think you're right. We have a two-party system. There's a lot of good people that are doing electoral reform work, but it's not done yet. So we have to live in the system that we have. And we don't want this nativist party. I encourage everybody that's listening to this Biden Republicans rally to go read Republican Women for Progress's policy principles, because I think that's the best articulation of where the party needs to go that I've seen. So I'm curious, maybe Jennifer or Megan, you can jump in and share us a little bit more specifically about what those policies are. And then do you think that they're at odds with where the GOP is today? So whoever wants to take that.
Well, I guess I
Jennifer,
can start with.
Sure. Go ahead, Megan.
No, I was going to take the kind of second part of it and then let Jenny go to the first. But our without reading them verbatim, our policy principles are very much out of line with where the current party principles are. It's the concepts of being that big tent party and welcoming people that may not be traditional Republican voters or traditional Republican volunteers, not having a better stance in the global community, not being kind of this protectionist party, and really to get America back to its rightful place in the global economy and the global kind of political sphere. But truly just to get back to this sense of democracy and the rule of law, and not being assholes, and being okay with people that don't look like us, and being able to have a conversation without just screaming at each other. It's just kind of, I like to call them our principles of just normal decency, which I feel like should be such an easy thing to get back to, but apparently it's not. It's tough.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of work to be done. Jennifer, do you want to talk a little bit about the principles, or why you see them, if they are at odds with the current party, like Megan said, then is the goal of Republican Women for Progress to kind of transform the base or transform the party?
So I think that really highlights the generational work that we're going to have to do with our organization. We've talked a lot about the voters and their role. Oops, sorry, I'm having baby technical difficulties.
We love babies. That's all good. Babies are welcome on the Biden Republican rallies.
We actually did a survey at the end of 2018, and we asked national Republican primary voters what they thought about how there were only 13 Republican women left in the House after the 2018 elections. And 71% of respondents said they were not concerned at all. And so there have been a few studies of, what we need to see to kind of move past what voters expect from the party. And this lack of addressing, the role of women and minorities in the party. And you have to have those messages coming from the Republican Party as a whole, and also other other, as they call it, like reliable Republican sources. And so I think that, that's really going to be the challenge is, if we're given this opportunity to reform the party after the election this year and in the time that follows, we'll really need, the party to actually come out and move it forward as well. And also, we need more Republicans to speak out, like is happening now, especially elected Republicans, about where the party should be moving. So it'll be a challenge for sure, and I think everybody's kind of looking to see what that fight will look like.
Yeah, I think it definitely gets easier if there's a Biden landslide and a Democratic sweep. It's easier for Republicans to get that shell shock where you get party leaders to speak out. One thing that we're trying to figure out is measurements for the health of the Republican Party. So I'm convinced that you're going to need some more high profile national leaders to say that was bad. We need to redo, or we need to do a big progress. We need some significant progress. What are you thinking is a fundamental groundwork for the success of these reform efforts? Is it high profile speakers? Is it devastating electoral losses? Can you walk us through some of what you're going to be looking at in the election outcomes?
I think, yes, I definitely think, people within the party need to speak out. It needs to be people that Republican voters listen to. I'd like to think that a lot of people listen to us, but we just need more people. If we get this opportunity to come out and present a different view, right? A different view of the party that doesn't depend on the voters that the Republican Party has been depending on since 2016. I think losing the Senate will be a huge. If the Republican Party loses the Senate, that would be a big message. I think we're going to lose some high-profile Republicans, and just look at all the Republicans who have already left their positions, and Republicans who have had devastating losses. So I think all of those things we have to see to kind of for the current party representatives and the current administration to kind of see that there isn't a future on this path. But I just keep waiting for the party, though, to realize that, just if you look at demographics and numbers, you can't keep ignoring these huge constituencies that you have to survive. So it seems like at some point, reason will win out, but it hasn't yet. So yeah. I guess I'm not surprised.
Hope springs eternal. Megan, I'm going to go to you next. So the goal is to elect more women. And will you tell us a little bit more about what you think electing women will do for the party and why you think it's so important? Because, I agree it's a absolutely fundamental goal, but I think a lot of people, when they hear that, think identity politics. And I'm just curious how you explain that to Republicans, that electing women is essential.
Well, I think on the note of identity politics, the Republican Party likes to say they don't play identity politics, but if you look at them over the past several months, their identity is of the racist, non-science believing old white man. And so I think they're plenty good at playing identity politics. Yeah. But, as Jenny said, our goal in electing women is, our original thinking back in 2016 was if there were more women in Republican leadership, whether that's elected or just within the party, Donald Trump never would have been the nominee in the first place. And so I think kind of number one is to have those women have seats at the table to be able to make those more informed decisions. I think that, women just by our nature think a little differently than most men do. And so I think that's kind of option number one. Number two is, the reason Democrats have such good female representation is because they've had this pipeline for years, for decades, of just really good women in the party to kind of serve as those mentors and to serve as those role models for younger Democratic women to run for office and to be involved in politics. And the Republican Party just hasn't had that. So the sooner that we can really get kind of that more senior level of Republican women in, I think the sooner we can really develop that pipeline of good Republican women that see someone and say, hey, I want to be like her. Like, I want to run for office. I want to be involved. You know, because like right now, what teenage girl in South Mississippi is going to look up to Mitch McConnell and be like, oh, I want to be just like him when I grow up? Nobody, right?
Right.
So I think we need some more just good women in there. And apart from that, you know, you look at things like there's that kind of infamous picture from the White House, must have been a year or two ago now, when they were having the conversation on healthcare. And there was this whole national conversation of what's going to be the national strategy for a healthcare plan. And every single person in that room was a white man. And so we, I think as women, don't want these to be the only people making the decisions for us, for our lives, for our livelihood. Like we need to have that seat at the table. So it's really kind of a three-headed beast, if you will.
Yeah, I think building a pipeline is essential, and it takes a lot of work to build that talent pipeline. And if the party doesn't make it a priority, it's hard to get the resources that you need. So I'm just curious, what have been the obstacles you all have faced at Republican Women for Progress to build the pipeline for female candidates? And how would you like to get support from party structures in a post-Trump GOP? Jennifer, we'll start with you, and then maybe we'll go to Megan.
Gosh, well, you know, since we kind of operate outside the party, you know, that's both a benefit and also, you know, we're in the position of creating something that hasn't been created before. So we're kind of building from scratch here. You know, Republican women are about 40 years behind where Democratic women are. Because, you know, as we know, the party has never focused on, you know, creating those support structures, whether it's, you know, fundraising or otherwise, to kind of support training and recruiting Republican women to run for office. So, you know, and also we have Republican in our name, but we used to be Republican Women for Hillary. So, you know, I feel like a lot of times people judge us before they, you know, read our policy platform or see what our mission is, and or, you know, look at everything we've accomplished since we've been Republican Women for Progress. So yeah, and you know, right now, something that we're able to do though that I think really kind of moves the ball forward is, you know, we're able to be very aggressive if we see Republicans doing something that we don't like. You know, so for example, we had a candidate who an RNC chairperson was telling his network not to give her money because his buddy was running. And so we were able to come out in the press and call him out. So, you know, I think, good, you know, given our position, you know, it is, there are pros and cons. So we're always trying to strike a balance between, you know, that progress in our name and also still appealing to a lot of Republicans who still see themselves as part of the party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So Megan, I'm curious, the New York Times had an article about Kelly Loeffler this weekend, and it talked about how she started off as this moderate, pro-choice Republican, and she's the type of centrist that I imagine you all would be interested in running. And in order for her to win the nomination, she's had to become this far-right nativist extremist. So what do you think, you know, what's required to help these good candidates run strong centrist primaries so that they can govern as centrists?
I mean, that's kind of the difficulty with the nature of our primaries these days. And we saw so many women back in 2018 that were Republicans and had lifelong Republican credentials that came out of the gate saying, yes, I'm a Republican, but I'm running kind of on this anti-Trump, like let's bring the party back to its principles platform. And we saw almost all of them lose. And so the fact that we've become so polarized, I think, does nothing good for either party. And I think in order for some of these more moderate, more centrist Republican women to be able to win, we've just got to see a total change in the party ideology, which I realize that is so much easier said than done. But until you can kind of, ensure that there is enough representation of the rest of the party within the primary, that's what you're going to end up seeing is the Kelly Loefflers of the party and the folks that are just going as far to the right as possible in an effort to win the primary. And then, maybe they walk it back during the general, maybe they don't. Obviously, Kelly Loeffler has not walked any of hers back. I would, kind of argue that she's even continued to go towards the right. But yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that, but it's tough. I mean, that's kind of the $1 million question right now is how are we going to get our really good, moderate, smart women through when they're up against kind of the most staunch Trump base, who are the ones that are really making up kind of the bulk of these primaries. It's tough. Jenny probably knows because she's smarter than I am, but I don't know. That's like the impossible feat right now.
Jenny, we'll throw it over to you.
So a lot of the women candidates who come to us are obviously more centrist. And they have been really smart in picking where they're going to run. A lot of them have run and been successful in nonpartisan races, like at the local level, and kind of getting their foot in the door that way, which is awesome. We've had a lot of, moderate Republican women run and win in places that you wouldn't have thought they could win. Which is awesome because they're, trying to appeal to a much wider base. I think, we do have a lot of candidates or a number of candidates this cycle who are, more in the middle. And they've been careful about, the districts that they're running in. But it's tough, they have to kind of, they have to campaign and raise money and, a lot of times outside the party structure, which is, that's the hard part, I think, is, that's why we see all these Republican women kowtowing to the party because they need the money and they need the endorsements. And so, just trying to create a support structure outside of that, where we can actually support these women is critical. But we have had a few women run on the local and state level who, weren't the party favorite, and they were even, they were even harassed and, called out by the party, and they still won. And so, maybe hopefully voters are kind of looking more at, authentic candidates who are actually speaking to their constituencies, as opposed to, people who are just repeating the, talking points of the Republican Party right now. So hopefully we'll kind of see that in this wave of elections, and that could kind of help us get our foot in the door of getting more of these moderate Republican women into office.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go to audience questions in just a second. I have one more before we do, so please get your questions in now. But I'm curious, as you go about working for recruiting candidates, recruiting women, building a GOP movement that equally embraces women, how are you all as an organization, or what lessons have you all learned about not just building gender inclusion, but racial inclusion? And what obstacles do you think the GOP is facing to equally embrace women and racial minorities? Megan, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Jennifer on that.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to the fans of the frogs in the chat. They're quite loud. Yeah, I mean, listen, the biggest challenge right now is that the party is doing so poorly on all of the things that impact minorities and women. I mean, if you look at the COVID crisis, minorities are being disproportionately impacted over white folks that make up the majority of the Republican Party leadership right now, and they don't seem to care. You look at the healthcare plan that was promised, that was going to just kind of save the world. That hasn't happened yet. We heard a lot of talk about Ivanka Trump and her paid maternal and paternal leave goals during the election. That hasn't happened yet. And so I think if you're trying to be a party that's going to recruit and bring in women and minorities, you've got to give them something that's going to help them out, right? Like, they can't claim to be this pro-woman, pro-minority party if everything they're doing is just objectively hurting women and minorities. So I think that's number one. Number two is representation. If you're a minority high schooler, trying to decide where you fall politically, you may agree with some things, but not the other, and you look at just a snapshot of both parties, who looks more like you? It's certainly not the party of Mitch McConnell and Matt Gaetz and all these just, I keep saying it, but middle-aged white dudes. You want someone that's going to look like you and represent you and then care about things that you care about. And that's just not what the Republican Party is. So I think those are huge hurdles, but I would be remiss not to mention that the president himself has got to be the biggest hurdle, because if he's out there spewing things that he did during the campaign and now during his presidency, about how there are rapists and murderers coming across the border, all the things he said about women that I don't need to repeat, all the things he said about minorities that I don't need to repeat, that's going to turn you off. And it's not only impossible to recruit people to be in the party, but it's even more impossible to recruit people to be candidates for that party if that's who you're up against. I mean, imagine if we want to go after a candidate that's never really run for office before, never really been involved in politics before, and they have to go justify being a part of this party that's so anti to basically their whole family and their whole community and their whole everything. Like, that's just not going to happen. And Jenny alluded to the Republican Party's self-written autopsy back in 2012 that said verbatim, first thing, if we're going to survive as a party, we have to do better with women and minorities. And what have we done? Worse, like way worse with women and minorities. So right. I think it's going to just take a total deep cleansing to kind of really build back the blocks to be this big tent party that's welcoming to people that don't just look like old white dudes.
Yeah, there's a bit of a chicken and an egg problem that it sounds like you've laid out. Is we have bad messengers and a bad message, which makes it hard to recruit more diverse candidates. But people seeing themselves reflected in the party is one of the things that it will take for them to want to join the party. So Jennifer, how do we overcome that vicious cycle, and how do we encourage, what are you all doing at Republican Women for Progress to make sure that not only do more women run, but more women of color run for leadership in the party?
Great question. Megan and I actually just did an interview about this the other day. So it's top of mind. Actually at Republican Women for Progress, on average over the years, the 3 years that we've helped candidates, about 50% of our women identify as minorities. And, I think a lot of those women come to us, for the same reason, moderate Republican women come to us because they don't have those support structures within the Republican Party to run for office. And so they have to look elsewhere. And so, you already have all these amazing Republican women who are also minorities who want to run for office, but they're just, they're not being paid attention to by the party. So even in this environment, you already have all these women ready to run, and you're kind of, missing that opportunity. And kind of something that we highlighted in our interview that we recently did is, especially recently with all the racial justice, questions that have come up, and, all of the horrific realities that have been brought to the surface. Our Black Republican women candidates have to spend so much of their time answering for the party and answering for Donald Trump as they're campaigning. and it takes up all their time, right?
Yeah.
And so, like Megan said, if you're an amazing Republican woman minority, Republican woman who's a minority who's running for office, not only do you not have the support structure, but you also have to answer for the party constantly. So, that's what we've really tried to, we've actually been able to focus on that a lot in terms of, what support structures not only do Republican women need that they're not getting, but Republican women who are minorities. And luckily, we've been able to partner with a lot of nonpartisan organizations, whether it's for the AAPI community or, different African American Republican groups, and kind of engage them more in this issue of the barriers that these women are facing. So again, it'll take time, but we've actually, that's a lot of the women that we deal with. We're learning a lot of, what needs to be changed.
Yeah, I love that coalitional approach too. So thank you. Well, our group chat is exploding with questions, so I'm going to pass it over to the Biden Republicans themselves who have questions. First will be from Polly. Polly, what's your question for Megan and Jennifer?
Hi, thank you. Okay. Hi, thank you for taking my question. I guess I'm wondering, we've seen politics get really dirty, frankly, and full contact sport. Women are typically more delicate, and I'm wondering if you're seeing a problem getting women to run, with just how vulgar and abusive almost politics has become, with how that's become.
All right, so Megan or Jennifer, either of you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I guess just very briefly. Well, first, Polly, I love your ducks or frogs in the background. We're team like animals in the background here.
I'm actually eating my chickens and the ducks.
Oh, chickens! There you go.
Chicken eggs.
Love it. So it's kind of weird because I've almost seen just the opposite. People or women specifically see kind of the vulgarity and just like how everything is gross and offensive now, and they want to step up and run, to be a part of that change, to just change the conversation. I think it has become much more difficult on them because we, as women that are being outspoken in the media every day, are receiving, I think, way more kind of hate mail and targeted just like online bullying than most men do. But if anything, as we said in 2016, and I think it remains true today, the best thing that Donald Trump has done for this country is that he really did inspire so many women and minorities to run for office because they felt threatened. I mean, and not just threatened, but they felt like they had, if no one else was going to do it, they had to do it. They had to be the change that they wanted to see. And so I think that, yes, it's more vulgar. Yes, women are grossed out, but they're taking that as like a call to battle, is like they should be the ones to step out and change the tone. Yeah. Jenny, I mean, you, again, are smarter than I am, but I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, no, I mean, Megan is totally right. Even, in 2016, we received a lot of death threats and suspicious packages.
Fan mail.
Yeah, fan mail. Sorry, fan mail. Our women candidates have been harassed online and in person. But they're aware of what's going to happen in this environment if they run for office, especially if they don't agree with the party right now. We I know Cody X does this a lot, but we give a lot of pep talks, when these things are happening to them on the campaign trail, and we're just like, yeah, we hear you. It sucks. This is why it's so important that you're running to change this.
Yeah. So our next question is from Dana. Dana, the floor is yours.
Oh, great. Well, I want to thank everyone first for your time. I really appreciate it, Megan and Jennifer. It's been eye-opening, so thank you. And I did just want to ask you, regarding kind of diversifying the party and supporting women of color. I just wanted to know, are you yourselves kind of being the change that you want to see? Are you doing things like mentoring young girls of color, or do you have anything? And I know you're doing so much, and so it's just really a question. Have you thought about, if you're not doing those things, how to kind of bring girls of color, mentor or build bridges for them? Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Yeah. Megan or Jennifer?
Yeah, so I guess about this time a year ago, we kind of had the idea that we should have had long ago, that we needed to at least start some sort of college outreach program, to really, especially to reach out to these young women and girls that were kind of right on the cusp of turning 18 and we're going to be voters soon. And, kind of, as I talked about, having those role models and kind of just those mentors within the Republican Party that maybe they haven't had before, for people that look like them or think like them. And so that's kind of getting off the ground. I would obviously love to be doing so much more in that space. And I think there's so much more that we can be doing. I think certainly once we get through this election and have a little more time to breathe, that's got to be our next number one focus, is how are we going to, apart from just the traditional methods of, recruiting voters and candidates and campaigners, how do we start this pipeline of women and minorities and minority women that really want to be engaged with the party? And that's got to be our number one priority going forward if we're going to make any sort of changes.
Yeah, Jennifer?
Yeah, no, that's like Megan said, if we had more money and more, we're a volunteer organization right now. So, I mean, absolutely, if we could be focusing on that, that would be amazing. We kind of get at that a few different ways. A lot of the groups we work with, for example, Higher Heights, they deal with African American candidates and women who want to get, who want to become part of the political process. And a lot of times our nonpartisan groups don't know what to do with their Republicans. And so we get a lot of minority Republican women who want to run for office sent to us, just because there just aren't a lot of groups like us out there focusing on this, and probably no groups focusing on this since we're kind of acting outside the party. We also mentor, I think it's high school age women. I know Ariel did it this year through Running Start. They have a campaign simulation every year. And it's always a very diverse crowd of young girls who are high school age. And so we are trying to, like Megan said, address more women in college, and also, women at the high school level. So they know, even if they are a minority Republican woman, that there are other Republican women out there who have their back.
Yeah, it sounds like I've never heard of Higher Heights, but that sounds like a good organization. It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done to build up these pipelines. And I don't know, Dan, if you have a follow-up question, feel free, or we can go ahead to our next questioner.
Yep, that
Okay.
was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, all right. So Catherine, you're up next. What question do you have for Jennifer and Megan?
Yeah, hi. Since you worked on getting Hillary elected in 2016, I was wondering if you saw any measurable differences in this cycle, and if so, what are they? What do you think caused them? And do you care to make a prediction?
I think a prediction more than who we hope to win, huh? Jennifer, you want to take her question?
Man. I mean, well, I guess a prediction. I think Biden will win, but I don't think it will be by a lot. Obviously I thought Hillary was going to win, so don't, I'm not going to put money on this quite yet. But I feel like in terms of evidence that things are changing, most of what we're seeing is anecdotal, of course, but we have so many women who come to us who voted for Trump in 2016, and they're like, wow, I've seen what he's done, and I'm definitely not voting for him again. We help source a lot of women for different news pieces, and so it's a lot easier to find Republicans who are willing to come out and say, I can't vote for him again. My 90-something-year-old great aunt has changed her mind. So I feel like a lot of women are in that position who we hear from. I think also, you see so many groups right now out there, like Republican Voters Against Trump, Lincoln Project that we're working with, and they have so many testimonial videos from Republicans of all types who are saying, I'm not voting for Trump again. Like, we have to vote for Biden to get back to reality. So I guess that's kind of what we've seen on our end.
Megan, what about you? You have any predictions?
I can't give I still have PTSD from trying to give predictions in 2016. So my prediction is that the election will take place on November 3rd, and we probably won't have a result on November 3rd, but I hope Joe Biden wins. I would say just to the first point about what's changed, it's gotten nastier. We thought that it was bad in 2016 with just everyone throwing horrendous insults at each other that had nothing to do with policy platforms or anything really truly political. But as we've seen, and it's just even in the past few days and weeks, like, it's just gotten just absolutely chaotic, and no one is talking about the issues. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are talking about the issues. No one on the Republican side is talking about the issues. There are no rules anymore. Trump has just decided to ignore all of the debate rules and the debate dates. And now we're seeing a real threat to the rule of law and the sanctity of elections, and that he's just going to contest the result if it's not one that he likes. And so I think that's certainly not something that we expected in 2016. Just in terms of women that we've worked with, we saw a lot of women in 2016 that did hold their noses, and they decided to vote for Trump because, okay, they didn't like Hillary Clinton. They've kind of been indoctrinated their whole lives of, like, Clintons are bad, everyone against them is good. But since election day, it's just, Trump now has a record. At that point, he, had his kind of platform and his campaign to run on, but now he has 3.5 years of really no action, and if anything, really kind of inaction or reverse action for things that would be good for women voters. And these women have just truly said, like, screw it. Like, I'm not going to hold my nose anymore. Yes, I'm a Republican, but I realize, like, what is right and what is good and what we should be doing. And so I think that that's probably the biggest change, that you're seeing Republicans really throw everything out the window of, like, I'm done.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we'll end it on that note. So Megan and Jennifer, thank you both for joining us so much. We're grateful for the work that you're doing to help elect Joe Biden, and then more broadly to help reform the Republican Party. It's crucially important. So thank you all for tuning in, and we are continuing to do our phone banks throughout the remaining days of the elections. So everyone that's listening and participating in Biden Republicans, you can also make calls into swing states. This week, we worked with the Biden campaign in Florida, and we made a bunch of fascinating calls to Florida people. Man, they're not joking. There's a reason why they have their own moniker. I don't know where we're going to be doing calls next week, but we are going to be making calls Wednesday at 5. So you're welcome to join us. And so again, everyone, thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thanks, Reed.
Thank you, Reed.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.